Hi there, I'm Charles Bell. I am a professional illustrator and permanent faculty in the School of Communication Design at the faculty at the at the University of the Arts here in Calgary, Alberta. And I wouldn't be any of those things without my dad, Colin Bell here. He has set an example for me in living a life of art and dedication to it and creativity. And he's here to talk to you about his process and his art and the path that he's followed through his life of painting. And the talk's really aimed at aspiring artists and those who are building their careers and but who also have some experience in art. And so he'll be going through some interview questions, talking through some examples. I'm here largely to support him, just going through slides, what have you, but I might interject as needed. And so without any further ado, I'd like to introduce my father, Colin Bell. Yeah, take it away.
Thanks, Charlie.
Okay, so I'll just get out of the frame.
I'm expecting our interviewer, Liana, who I've never met in person, but she got in touch with me and had some terrific interviewees in the past, and so I agreed to do an interview. Liana's first question was going to be, could you tell us how and when did you discover your talent and vocation? I was born in Buenos Aires in Argentina back in 1936, which in Europe and North America would have coincided with the recession, and it wasn't felt that badly in Argentina. I was lucky to be born into a middle-class family in which several of my extended family members were proficient artists. There was a sister of my mother's that did miniature watercolors and did portraits of several of the family and other people. And there was a great uncle that did oil paintings, and my godfather, my father's oldest brother, was a proficient artist in oils. And I had another godfather who also painted in oils and did ink sketches. And after sort of introducing the business of my extended family, that were all very involved in art and supportive of my early efforts at art, then my art lessons started in elementary school, where we would have one lesson per week in which we were given a picture of a flower within a grid to copy. And so this went on through elementary school until in junior high school, they started giving us portraits of national heroes from Argentina that we had to copy. And at this time, my mother gave me a book from Andrew Loomis that was called, I think, Drawing the Figure for All It's Worth. And that was a real eye-opener for me, you know, as to how the body works, how it can be expressed in drawing, not in painting. I started to draw the figure, and I thought I was pretty good. And by the time that I started high school, I was obviously the most proficient artist in the class, and sort of following Andrew Loomis's example of sort of drawing from life, I thought I'll do some studies on my left hand. And my godfather, who was a proficient artist in oils, he was very impressed with these studies and decided that I should take private lessons. And so he gave me private lessons with Julia Perea Munoz, who was a graduate cum laude from the Yale University School of Art. And so my first lesson, I appeared at her apartment, and she gave me a pencil and a sheet of paper and set up a cone, a cube, and a sphere, and said, "Can you draw this?" And I thought, I'm disgusted, you know. I thought I was going to be drawing very interesting stuff, and look at what I'm. So what I was faced with was this arrangement of geometric forms. And so I quickly sketched it in and sort of brushed in some shades. And she had a look at it and she said, well, she said, that's not bad, but it's you know, it's very messy, and you never did any of the shadows on the table in between the forms. So she set up a new full sheet of Canson paper, gave me a 2B pencil in a wooden pencil that I had to sharpen to a sharp point and keep rotating to maintain the sharp point. She said, I want you now to do the shades, you know, of all the objects and the shades on the table, and do it so that you don't see the outline at all, and that you can't see the individual strokes doing the shades and shadows. So I started on this, and I couldn't finish it in the first session of 2 hours, and so it took me 2 sessions of 2 hours to finish the first drawing. I must say, she was much more impressed with the second effort, and so she started me with a new arrangement, having to use the same technique. And she kept me doing these 2-hour sessions, you know, with very close strokes, so that you couldn't tell that it wasn't a watercolor wash. These strokes were so finely placed together. After 6 months, we started doing the same shapes with individual strokes that you could see, which is sort of like I don't know, the sort of thing that you see on stamps and on currency. And after that, I had to try doing cross-hatching. And after that, we started on the bust of Voltaire. And after that, she asked me to see if I could get a human skull, so that I could study the structure of the head. And I fortunately had a school friend who was a medical student, and he very obligingly got me a human skull, which I took home to study. And when I did, my dad, who was sort of fey, he almost had a bird when I brought this skull into the house. And so I had to get rid of it post haste, and Julita, my art teacher, had no problem with accepting it. At this point, I was starting university, and between my art classes and my piano classes and playing rugby and playing tennis and chasing girls, I found that my grades at the university were suffering, and so I had to quit my classes in piano and also the private art classes.
So you're working with pretty much all the mediums. How did you become to know them so well, and what attracts you to working with all mediums?
Okay, after just drawing, which was with a pencil, I was attracted to oils, which my great uncle and my godfather were proficient in, and they would allow me to get into their studio, and they would give me old panels or boards and old brushes that had very little bristle left, and old paints that were getting pretty hard. And so I was allowed to use their materials and produce, paintings. And I thought that if I ever died and went to heaven, it would smell of turpentine. I really was engaged with oils. I thought that all real art was produced in oils. And so I carried on even after university, producing 5 or 6 paintings a year in oils, and was reasonably happy with that. And then in 1981, my wife Irene, who was also interested in art, took art lessons with Susan Wogar through the Calgary Board of Education and Continuing Education program. She would go in the evenings. And she was taking these lessons in watercolors. And when I saw the stretched watercolors and the fluidity of the colors and the spontaneity and the transparency, I became quite intrigued. And Irene was so engaged with these lessons that she put herself down for another session. And after the first class, she said, "You know, Colin, there's still room in the class. Why don't you put yourself down?" So I did, and that started me on watercolors. And Susan Woolgar was the instructor. She's a very proficient artist. And she said, "You know, I belong to this group that's called The Group, and why don't you apply? You know, it would be a good thing for you." So I applied and was juried in. And so in 1982, I became a member of The Group. And from then on, I participated in workshops with them and classes, and I participated in the first shows, art shows, in which my work was one of the exhibits. And from then on, I started selling some art through these shows. And well, I was conscious that I still needed to learn more, you know, in order to produce better art. And so from then on, I took a series of workshops and classes in watercolors. And little by little, I was selling just watercolors. And I wondered, you know, why am I abandoning oils? And so I liked oils because of their fluidity, the possibility of creating soft edges. And there were less traps than there were in watercolors. So, yeah, at that time, I was also noted down for another watercolor workshop with Brent Leacock here in Calgary. And when I turned up for the workshop, Brent said, "Oh, that was last week. This week it's acrylics. If you like, I will return your fee." And I said, "No, darn it! I've set aside this weekend for artwork." And so I went immediately and bought a basic set of acrylics, and that got me started on acrylics. And acrylics are they're water-based medium, but they are different from watercolors. That watercolors dry lighter than what you see when you put on the paper, and acrylics dry darker. And the other thing is that acrylics are fluid while they are wet, but once they have dried, they are plastic on whatever, it's a board or whatever. And so one has to be very conscious, of these changes in medium. So acrylics is the last medium that I have tried, and it does allow me to do work that is as large as what you see behind, which is 24 inches by 36 inches. And the largest I have done in oils or acrylics is 36 inches by 48 inches, which is twice the size of what you see behind me. Okay, and I think that sort of covers the business of the various mediums. So
let's talk about what inspires you.
One can never tell what is going to inspire one. Sometimes it is a scene one sees in front of one, and that, I was a hiker and skier, and I did quite a bit of traveling worldwide with my wife while we were still healthy and able to do these things. So scenes from different places, and the scene that you see behind me is from a ranch that I was in with some other artists 2 years ago. It was called the Anchor Bar Ranch near the Chain Lakes in Alberta. And what you see there is 4 cowboys having a conference about how to go about branding 470 calves. So I thought, boy, that's a unique moment so it captivated me, and I just had to paint it. And I got permission from the owner of the ranch to paint from her photograph. So here is the actual photograph, and you'll see that what I painted was I put a grid, and what I'm painting is exceeding the size of the photograph, because I figured that the photograph didn't really do justice to the scene. So I made the scene a little larger than what the photograph expressed. What else? Oh, well, sometimes it can be a cat that's rolled on its back and is waiting for its tummy to be scratched, or it can be a flower, or an arrangement, or a set of buildings. It can be a street that in Spain we saw a street that was stepped. Had steps to go up, and which vehicles had to negotiate. So yeah, I like to introduce figures in scenes to give the feeling of occupation, of maybe a pretty difficult landscape that and also figures can contribute to making a story out of a painting. Location of a figure or a man-made something or other, or an animal, I learned from various people and workshops. Always put more space in front of the creature or person, to walk into the way that they are facing, not put them almost facing outwards, because one's tendency, as with arrow shapes, is to follow the arrow shape or to follow the way that the creature or person is facing, which can lead you right out of the painting instead of into it. And so from a point of view of visual travel, you want to avoid leading the person out rather than into the painting.
You've been very active. You've been skiing, you've been hiking, you've been going everywhere. How did that work with painting, which is kind of, static? You kind of have to be in one place. So, because I can tell only from looking at you that you're a very active man. So, how did you manage to be also a very still person and spend hours and hours in paint?
Well, I would never travel without my watercolors with me. So I would travel with a portable easel, which was about 2 feet wide, 2 feet long, and a small set of watercolors and about 20 sheets of paper. And also I would carry a sketchbook, small, pocket size, and I learned to use a piece of cardboard to make a rectangle so that one's paint didn't drip over the sides and mark the next sheet. So here is my first effort. This was in Florence, the Ponte Vecchio. And if you look very closely, you'll see that some of my ink, which is indelible ink, I had started drawing in indelible ink, and it was too small for the arch that I had to produce. So I said, I'm not going to waste this paper. So I carried on, and did the right drawing, finished the drawing in indelible ink, and then started in with watercolor. And by the time that I got the watercolor in, you don't really notice the mistake with the drawing. So that was another aspect of travel. I filled 12 of these little books with 50 paintings each. So that was something that I just did quite often as a precursor to doing a painting. I'd do a study at that level. Here's another. This was at that ranch that I stayed at with these other artists. So there's the sketch in ink and watercolor. And here is the finished watercolor. I hope you can see that properly. So that was also painted on site. So right after I'd done the sketch. So I attacked the watercolor with some confidence because I'd done the sketch previously.
Let's talk about the message in your art. Is it important for you that your art have a message, or you let the viewer decide what the message is for them?
Yeah, the message is to myself. You know, I want to see what I would like to see, just as Turner said, you know, when somebody mentioned to him, oh, that doesn't look like what you're looking at. And he said, no, but isn't it what you would like to see? And I feel much the same way, you know, that art is not necessarily photographic, although there is some that is what is called photorealism. That is not my style. I tend more towards impressionism. What is important to me is composition, contrast, visual path, and color. One can manipulate these things to create artwork that one wouldn't mind having on the wall. And it also, when dealing with landscape, one needs to create a sense of space. Too many paintings try to put too much contrast and color in background material so that it comes forward at one, and it destroys the sense of space that one should find in a landscape.
We didn't talk about your palette.
Oh, yes. Well, the palette, of course, depends on the medium. A palette for watercolors, I like a palette that has a lot of wells. For my plein air work, I just have 12 wells. So I just have 12 colors, including black. Sometimes people say, well, you should never have black. But I find it's a very fast way to get a dark value, you know. So I mix the black with whether it be red or blue or green, you know, to rapidly go down to a dark value. For oils, the classic palette with a thumb hole, you know, is what everybody uses. I used it as well. For acrylics, the palette I use is very similar to the watercolor palette. Yeah, when I have to go outdoors with to paint outdoors in acrylics, I have a plastic palette which one has to either tape down or tie down or somehow weight down, because when you're outdoors, you can never tell whether the wind is going to carry your material away. So everything has to be tied down. As to specific colors, okay, 3 blues or 4 blues would be ultramarine is the closest sort of to a red shade, and then cobalt blue is a neutral blue, true blue, if you like. Then the phthalo blue is the closest to green, and cerulean blue is sort of nice for sky color. It's a soft, pretty opaque blue, whereas ultramarine is semi-opaque, and the phthalo blue is definitely a staining color. So when you use phthalo blue in a watercolor, be careful because once it's down, it's impossible to lift it out again. That deals with the blues. You can use some greens. There's sap green, which is a staining color, and there's Jenkins or Hooker's green, which is a transparent color. Yellows, most yellows are opaque. So in watercolors, opaque colors should be the last color that you put on the painting, because if you try painting over them, you create mud. So a warm yellow would be cadmium yellow, whether it be deep or medium. And then cool yellow would be lemon yellow or aureolin. And as far as reds are concerned, cadmium red is sort of a medium red, and alizarin crimson is a cool red. And then there's what else? There's oranges. Orange is, are definitely warm. Cadmium orange is the only one that I use. I think that sort of looks after my palette, except that for watercolors I now use in the studio, I use a porcelain palette which weighs 3 kilos, but it is beautiful in that one can, it doesn't even stain. You can lift everything off. It becomes perfectly white again.
Do you use palette knives?
Palette knife. I have used a palette knife for some paintings in the past, just for oils. I haven't really used it for acrylics. Acrylics don't have the same body that oils have. If you try to put on, big bold strokes that give you a lot of texture in acrylics, it's very hard unless you put some other medium that stiffens them up. And they are available, but I haven't used them. So yes, I've used a palette knife in oils. And you can use a palette knife in watercolors too, mostly to create very hard edges to a wash, or to scrape out strokes in a wash. Any other questions?
What is your opinion or view on other mediums such as pastels or ink?
Well, let's put it this way. There are many other mediums that I have not experienced, and which has been used for decades, centuries by other artists very successfully. I feel I am already enough of a master of all, no, sorry, a jack of all trades, a master of none. I would hesitate to start doing pastels. Pastels, I know you find it very difficult to blend colors. You have to select an exact color for whatever point of the painting you are attending. So real pastel artists have an incredible array of dozens and dozens and dozens of colors.
I see that you're using graphite when you're doing your sketches.
Doing graphite, yes, I have done sketches in graphite. It is not something I've done for a long time. I prefer doing these ink and watercolor sketches. But yeah, graphite can allow you to do a study, which is just a study in values, not in color. And it takes more time to establish a value with a graphite pencil than it does with a stroke of watercolor. So I find that watercolors are a lot faster than sketching in graphite.
So, Colin, in the past, you were an architect.
Yes, I was. I was a practicing architect for over 30 years. So my love was art, not architecture. So I was an adequate architect. Yeah, I never produced anything, really memorable.
I was wondering because you've been several generations of artists, and each artist had his own personality. You were quite unique. Look at Charles. Charles is an illustrator. His technique is completely different.
Yes.
Yet he inherited, he continues a generational line of artists. What do you think your input into Charles is?
Well, my influence was simply that I supported, I understood, his drive to art. And I remember first noticing, his talent when he was about, I forget, about 11 or 12 years old. We were in Argentina, and we saw some scorpions there. And they were small. They were no larger than 2 inches long. And Charles did a study of a scorpion that was about 6 or 7 inches long. And the amount of detail and the trueness and confidence of the pencil marks, they told me, this guy, he really has it. And so from then on, I never questioned, that he had the talent, that he had the urge, that his brain was wired for art. And so he carried on in his own line of work with my total understanding. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, I'm just going to the next question. When you are creating and you decide on a subject, what do you do? Do you research? Do you take lots of pictures? Oh, what do you do? What are the preliminaries?
Well, if one is outdoors, one is obviously influenced by what one sees before one. One may decide beforehand, that one wants to go to a certain place and see a certain viewpoint. But if one's in the studio, one has more range of subjects to choose from. And I've got a terrific library of images, of photographs that I have taken from our travels, from hiking, from skiing. And so I can go through on my computer all the images that I've stored there and decide, yeah, this is what I'd like to do. When I do that, I generally get a color print so that I don't have to be looking at the computer screen all the time. And so that's the process that I use. And what you saw over here is a sample of that. You know, this is a photo that was sent to me by the owner of the ranch. And I printed it out and decided, you know, was the composition exactly what I wanted? No, it wasn't. I massaged it a bit and produced what you see. What else were we going to say?
How do the surroundings, what happens around you, does it influence you, or you are on your own path? You are not influenced about the surroundings.
No, one is always influenced. And I really encourage other budding artists to not attempt to work totally on their own. You know, some artists think that to be influenced by anybody else is taboo. Not so. You can learn a lot by consorting with other artists and by taking lessons, by taking workshops, by going to galleries and seeing what other artists have produced. So, yeah, by all means, be influenced by other artists. Do not attempt to emulate them in anything other than their process, not their product.
What about right now? Are you going through a special phase, or are you continuing what you've started in the past?
Right now is a difficult moment because my wife is having a lot of trouble with mobility. She is facing knee replacement surgery in 10 days' time. And in the meantime, she has developed problems with her other knee. And so she requires a lot of support. So artwork is not really top on my mind. So it may be at least a couple of weeks until after the surgery that I can maybe think about doing artwork again.
You also have family in England?
Not in England, no. I still have some family in Argentina. I've got a cousin and I've got a younger brother. My youngest brother is still living in Argentina. And we're pretty close. Whenever I visit Argentina, I stay with him. That's about it. My mother was living until 7 years ago, 8 years ago. And so I used to, towards the end, I was visiting Argentina every year to see her. Once she died, I said, you know, this is a very expensive trip. And I would be going by myself, except for 2011, when Charles and his family came with us and we all visited Argentina together.
What's it like to have this dual identity?
We lived in Argentina until our kids were born. And then I sort of despaired of having a decent career in architecture. And at the time, my second brother was a student in Guelph in Ontario. And he said, you know, why don't you come to Canada? There's lots of work for architects in Canada. And so it proved to be true. I started off in Toronto and worked there for 6 weeks and decided that Toronto was not a place that I would ever feel at home in. And at the same time, I had a job offer in Calgary. And after doing a little research, I decided that Calgary would be ideal. It's a reasonably large city at the time, 330,000. And it was close to the Rockies, and it has a trout river that runs right through it, the Bow River, and also the Elbow River has some trout in it. And I was at that time I was really fond of fishing, and fishing trout was I thought an ideal thing for me, and it was through trout fishing that I got involved with hiking, because I'd hiked to different fishing venues until Irene said, well, fishing is fine for you, but it's not something that I like to do or want to do. And why don't we try hiking, that's something that we can both do. So to start with, I did it reluctantly with her, because she couldn't keep up with me to start with. But little by little, I found that I could take photographs while hiking, and man, the views that I could see inspired me to do artwork. So then I became quite hooked on hiking.
Doing plein air is very different from doing studio painting. What should someone be aware or mindful of when they decide to go and paint outdoors?
Well, to start with, there's the question of scale, and what is the scale of the work you're going to undertake outdoors. And unlike Monet, who had a trench dug so that he could have a huge canvas on pulleys drop into into this ditch while he painted certain portions of it. Most plein air work is pretty spontaneous, and you get out of the car and you may hike, up to some place or down to some place, or stay by the car. But anyway, you have to encounter the weather that is prevailing at the time, which may be hot and sunny and variably hot, with bugs around that come and bite you, or they may land on just painted portions of a painting and leave little tracks across the painting, which is annoying, to say the least. On the other hand, a wind may blow up, and I've had occasions when my work has landed on the floor because of the wind. And there was one memorable occasion when I wasn't painting, but participating in what they called a clothesline sale at the Leighton Centre, which they had clotheslines strewn up around the grounds. And with clothes pegs, they had unframed art hanging from these clotheslines. A wind blew up that was probably something like 50 or 60 kilometers an hour. And all the clothes pegs opened up, and we had artwork that had to be picked up all over the countryside. So one thinks that rain is one of the main problems, and I won't say that it isn't a problem, but on the other hand, I have been painting a watercolor when it started raining, and I just flopped it down, and so as it was lying on dry ground yet, it protected the watercolor from the rain until the rain shower stopped, and then I continued painting. So these are some of the vicissitudes. The other thing, of course, is cold. And something like oils, you can paint below freezing conditions, and I've done that. Watercolors, even by mixing water with vodka, which allowed me to dissolve the paint and put it on the paper, I would see that immediately I had spread a wash of watercolor on the paper. There would be like a cobweb of ice crystals spread right over the wash until that dried, and then it was okay, but it was extremely annoying and disconcerting at the time. So although people say, oh yeah, you can paint below freezing temperatures, I say, yeah, you can, but should you?
Let's talk about your abstract work.
Oh, one more thing about painting outdoors, and that is the scale, and smaller work is encouraged because a smaller easel is less likely to fly down onto the ground than a larger piece of work that catches more of the wind, and so allows more force to force the easel over. In doing sketching, I just wanted to show you, I carry this in my pocket, and it contains a couple of brushes, small brushes. And it carries one or two of these indelible ink pens. And this is the palette that I use. It's a little box, and it carries 12 colors, and that is perfectly adequate for the kind of work that you're going to undertake. And one of these has come out. Okay, any other questions?
Yes, your abstract work. Let's talk about your abstract work.
Oh, okay. To start with, when I started taking private lessons in Argentina, Julita, my instructor, insisted that I keep a sketchbook for homework, which was to be abstract work, just in black and white graphite, in which I had to produce a work that was interesting visually, and which had a center of interest and a visual path. So unfortunately, I didn't keep that, but I got to understand that even in abstract work, there is a possibility and a duty to produce something that has a visual path and some interest. So here is an example of an abstract that I did, that I called I think we called it the dance of yin and yang, which each major shape, is echoed. So one and one, they're not facing each other perfectly. They are on a diagonal, and I put some diagonal streaks across and some contrasting the only warm areas are these two spots over here that really stand out. I'm sorry. I have never done a Zoom interview before and have some trouble.
So, Colin, how do you show your work? Do you go to art, salons? Do you go to galleries? How do you show your work?
Well, I show my work on my website, which is www.colinbellart, all one word.com. I show it in group shows, and I show it in galleries. And the galleries have been anywhere from Western Mexico, Arizona, and Western Canada. So at present, the Willock and Sachs Gallery in Banff is probably the best known.
In your notes that you sent to me, you were talking about corrections when you work with each medium. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Right. When I do a painting, and I'm not saying that everybody should do this, but it's what works for me. I sort of fill the canvas and do such corrections as I feel necessary at the time, and then I put it aside. So if it's an oil, it would be let it dry for a while, a few days maybe, and then have a look at it again. And now you're not involved in the production of the thing. You can look at it a bit more dispassionately, as though it were somebody else's painting, and you say, how close is that to what I think it should be? And if it isn't exactly what it should be, in your opinion, decide, where are the problem spots, and can you do something about them? And sometimes you can. In the case of a watercolor, watercolors are beautiful as transparent medium. And if you overwork areas, they die. So there are many watercolors that I say, the hell with it, I've done too much already. So I can always put gesso over the whole painting and let it dry, and then use it for future acrylic. Acrylic can be, it can be corrected many times and it doesn't die. So it's a much more forgiving medium than watercolors. Watercolors is probably the most unforgiving medium. So a lot of people shy away from it. Shouldn't do that, but on the other hand, watercolor is a medium in which you should plan your process much more carefully than with other mediums.
You have seen quite a bit in the realm of arts. You've been painting for decades. How would you say that the arts are doing right now in, let's say, Western Canada, because that's where you live? Did you see any changes in the past, let's say, 2-3 decades?
Mainly in the process of sales. Artwork in the 70s, watercolor was the medium. And I never sold an oil. until I think late in the 90s. Now I regularly sell acrylics as probably more than watercolors. I remember approaching one of the galleries in Calgary, and this was in the 90s, and they said, sorry, we're totally uninterested in your watercolors, but we'll show your oils. At that time, they said they would charge 50%. And I thought, wow, I'm not sure I'm prepared for that, especially if you're putting a frame on the thing. So yeah, that's the story.
Right now, you live with Irene in at a different location than Charles.
Right.
Do you have a studio there? How do you work?
We used to live in a house, a two-story house with a developed basement, and my studio there was 11 feet by 22 feet. And I had a collection of 14,000 slides, and I had even the furnace room was a repository for a lot of my paintings. A lot of my work was there. Then we had to move to a senior's residence, and we live in a two-bedroom suite. And although I produce quite a bit in the second bedroom, a lot of my work is at Charles's basement now. So thank you to Charlie and to his wife for their being so patient with me. My studio now, we used to have, until last year, we had a translating business from English to Spanish, Spanish to English. And so we needed a second computer in order to do this translating business. We got a filing cabinet and a bunch of files and materials pertaining to producing translations. So quite a translating library. We quit our translating business last year. We said we're not getting enough of that to warrant all this space. And so we quit translating. Now the space is mostly my studio, which is probably about 12 feet by 8 feet or so. And in it, I've got to have storage for materials and storage for work and a portable easel. And yeah, that's about it. So yeah, one doesn't need a huge amount of space in order to produce art. A lot of people just work out of their kitchens, and we don't really have a kitchen as such. So that's about it.
How was it for you to work during pandemic when we were quite isolated?
Well, for me, it was an outlet, from frustration at not being able to go out and see friends, go out and have meals at restaurants. Some places were highly undesirable to visit because of the amount of pandemic that was found there, like Banff. So being able to paint was an outlet. It allowed me to enjoy an activity and not experience so much frustration because of the pandemic.
Do you have in front of you slides or artwork that you wanted to show to the camera?
Well, there are some plein air works over here. This was the Elbow River at Bragg Creek Provincial Park. I was there with Charlie, so we both worked while Irene had lunch. And this was a ranch near Calgary that we also plein air with Charlie. This was from another ranch, an old homestead building. So very simple. This was another plein air from the Sibbald Creek Trail. This was from another ranch with painted along with Charlie. At one point I was surrounded by cattle, and I did another painting of them that sold. This is another plein air from the same ranch that has the cowboy conference behind me. So this was, I painted this and it started to rain, and fortunately some of my friends were behind me with a truck, and they rushed out and pulled down my easel and everything and bundled everything into the truck. So that salvaged that painting.
I visited Alberta in 2001, and I went to Canmore, Jasper, Banff. I also ran into a bear. I was wondering if you ran into a bear when you were in your, when you were working outdoors.
Yes, in one case, I was painting with a bunch of other artists by the lower Kananaskis Lake. And one of the artists that was down closer to the water than we were had a black bear appear and walked by her quite unconcernedly, but she said that's quite enough. She packed up her stuff and went into her car and didn't come back. Two other artists were close, the same group, different occasion. They were painting together by Kings Creek, also in the Kananaskis area. And one was down by the creek and the other one was up at a picnic ground. And the picnic ground pitched down to the creek, and then on the other side there was a slope that went up to Kings Creek Ridge. And they were both painting. The fellow by the creek, of course, had the creek noise sort of commanding his attention. And the fellow up on the campground, not the picnic ground, was looking across at the mountain slope on the other side of the creek. And he noticed he noticed movement in the bushes on the other side. And when he looked, he saw it was a grizzly bear coming down the slope towards the creek. So he tried shouting to his friend who was down at the creek. He said, there's a grizzly coming. And the fellow, because of the noise of the creek, he couldn't hear. So the grizzly appeared out of the bushes about 20 feet away from the artist. And the artist explained to us, he said, I knew I couldn't run. So he said, I tried talking to the bear. And the bear must have thought, what the hell do I do over here? You know, this guy's not in my space. I'm in his space. Maybe I won't attack him then. So the bear turned tail and just strolled down up the creek. And that was the end of that encounter. As hikers, yes, we've encountered bears, but I have never been closer than about 20 feet from a bear. And that was a big brown bear. And grizzlies, we have encountered several times, but not all that close, and usually in a group. Okay, that's about it for bears. My message is that what people see, you know, of one's work in galleries or in shows is one's best work. And not all one's work is of the same quality. There's a reason one only chooses certain works to go in galleries or to go in shows. And as I say, one has to evaluate one's work, giving it a space of time to settle in one's mind, you know, so then one can look at the work dispassionately and say, is it really my best? Can I really make it better, or do I have to discard it? So do not be discouraged when your work isn't as good as you think it should be. You can decide, you know, is it salvageable? Or do I go and repaint it? Or do I say, forget this, you know, it really didn't inspire me that much. I should try something different. So by all means, don't get discouraged by your failures. I think that even Rembrandt didn't hit a home run on every attempt. So one always sees displayed one's best work, and it probably should be, you know. But by all means, don't get discouraged. Do participate with other artists. You know, you get good advice and hints from other artists, whether they be colleagues or instructors. And maybe keep some of your bad work so that when you look at it in the future, you say, gee whiz, I sure know how to fix that one. And that is very, very good. So, yeah, just don't get discouraged and paint up a storm. Thank you.
Do you also speak Spanish as well?
Oh, yes, of course I speak Spanish.
I was wondering if you could give us a short message in Spanish.
Hace mucho que no visito la Argentina y ya no nos dedicamos a la traducción, pero todavía amamos la Argentina. Es un país extraordinario que padece de un gobierno que durante años ha sido un fracaso rotundo. Así que a todos los argentinos les digo, viva la Argentina.